Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello and thanks for downloading Beyond the Balls. You're listening to our 8th episode. Beyond the Balls is a co-production between Women's Sport Australia and Wisp Sports. We are your hosts, Ella Smith and Georgina Mallon, here to discuss all the topics on women's sport off the pitch. Hey Ella, how are you?
Hey G, I'm good. I'm really excited for this episode. It's our 8th one. We're getting in the role. It should be good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, today we have an amazing guest. We have Monique Murphy on the show. She's an amazing swimmer, Paralympian, and it's going to be a really good chat.
Yep, that's right. Today we welcome Monique Murphy to the show. As you said, she's an Australian Paralympic swimmer whose achievements include winning silver in the women's 400-metre event at the Rio 2016 Paralympics, being ranked number 1 in 400-metre freestyle and world number 5 in butterfly in the S10 classification in 2017, competing in 2 world championships and 4 Australian short course championships, and is a team leader of the Australian Para Dolphins. Monique was also diagnosed with endometriosis last year and has since become an ambassador for Qendo, as well as a Lifeline ambassador. Monique, welcome to the show.
Hi, ladies. Thank you for having me today.
No worries. So Monique, you were a passionate swimmer growing up in Canberra. What was swimming what was swimming for you before your accident? And was the Olympics or Paralympics, or actually Olympics, always your goal?
The Olympics was definitely my dream as a child. So I remember watching the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, and it was just absolutely incredible. And I knew that I wanted that chance to wear the green and gold, and I wanted to do what I loved, which was swimming at the highest possible level. So it was definitely always a dream. However, I wasn't able to turn that into a reality. I trained my heart out, and swimming for me, it was an identity. It just felt so much as who I was, and I used it a lot as a shield growing up. It was my reason for not conforming to a lot of what my friends were doing, wearing pretty dresses, wearing a lot of makeup. That wasn't me, and I could use swimming as sort of my shield as to why I didn't have to do those things. And it was my home away from home, and I loved it so much. But unfortunately, I was never able to stand up behind the blocks when it mattered and put that perfect race together. And I never so much as qualified for an age national championships. So I left the sport about when I was 18. And I definitely left knowing that I hadn't reached my potential.
Now let's go to 2014, where you were involved in a terrible fall, which resulted in the amputation of your right leg below the knee. Can you take us back to that time and explain what happened on that night and over the course of the next few weeks?
Yeah, so I moved down to Melbourne from Canberra, and I was studying a Bachelor of Social Work. And I was about 3 weeks into the course, and I'd been out of the water at this stage for about a year and a half. And I fell from a 5th floor balcony, and I landed on a glass roof below me. And that glass roof is really what saved my life, because the way that I landed, it broke my fall. And I really can't say any more than that, because I have absolutely no memory of how that accident happened or why. So I was in a coma for a week, and when I woke up, I was told what my parents had been told, which is that I jumped from the balcony. And I had to see a lot of trauma psychologists and psychiatrists to get a lot of evaluations done, which ultimately came back that I was in good mental health. So that was ruled out as an explanation as to what had happened, but it's what my friends and family had already been told. And I'd been in a coma for a week, unable to defend myself. So that's really where my passion for working with Lifeline comes from, because I experienced the stigma of mental health in those months following the accident, because I had to try to understand what had happened with no memory. Nobody had seen the accident either. And it was ultimately concluded or suspected that my drink had been spiked. So there were no blood, alcohol, or drug tests done on the night. I'd cut my neck open, and that was the most severe injury. And while I was lucky to miss the windpipe, when I arrived in hospital, there was so much glass in my neck that they were incredibly concerned that when they took it out, they would hit the main artery. So my dad refers to that moment as having to sign my life away and give full permission to the doctors to do what they needed to. And you're hearing my voice right now, so clearly I'm alive and well, and that team of doctors absolutely saved my life. And now I'm left with a scar on my neck and quite a lot of scars across my chest. But for me, they're signs of what my body was able to pull through. And along with many other broken bones and injuries, my right foot was so broken that it did have to be amputated. Strangely enough, my left foot was in a brace that night when I fell. I had recently torn the ligaments in that ankle, so it was actually braced up, which is probably the reason I still have that foot there. So my foot was amputated, and then a few weeks later, I elected to go to a below knee amputation due to the mobility that I would get from wearing a below knee prosthetic. So that's where I am today. Almost every other injury is healed, and that's really where my journey as a para swimmer started.
Yeah, on your website, I was going through, you were listing everything that was broken, and it was just phenomenal. And I was so, amazed that you were standing and doing hydrotherapy in a pool within a month of the fall. At what point in this recovery did you decide that you wanted to compete at the Paralympics?
Oh, probably a year later when I qualified for my first World Championships, which I didn't even realize I had done until Liesl Jones was interviewing me after the race and asked me how I felt about going to Glasgow, and I didn't even know what she was talking about. So initially, a lot of people, knowing my swimming background after the accident, kept saying things like, "You're going to go to an Paralympics, sorry, and you're a great swimmer, so that'll be what you do." And I had no interest whatsoever. And I'd grown up and I'd never actually watched a Paralympics. I'd never seen a para event before. I couldn't name a single Paralympian, and only because they're not presented to us in the media alongside the Olympic athletes. And I was such a huge fan of the Australian Dolphins my whole childhood. It really hit me how little I knew about this other world. And I think I'd always assumed as a child that there was just something different about the Paralympics, in the sense that maybe it was easier because they weren't presented in the same way. Maybe they weren't the same level of athletes that we were being shown. And in that hospital bed, it was just so clear to me that yes, I was missing my leg, but it was still my body. And even though I felt quite broken at that time, once my body healed, it was going to take the same amount of work and effort and early mornings to achieve that goal that I hadn't been able to get close to as a kid. And I was sitting in a bed with literally a brace or a cast on each one of my limbs. And I was thinking, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning right now. I don't even know how to get out of bed and go to the toilet. So it was just not on my radar. And I think because I was able to shut everything else out and just focus on what I needed to do and reset those goals. So instead of trying to qualify for a nationals or, set a new PB at the gym, I was trying to learn how to feed myself, how to sit up in the bed without getting lightheaded because I had no muscle mass, or learning to stand again. And I really credit being a swimmer as a child, because I knew that if you don't put the work in, you're not going to see the results. So I knew that I had to work hard. It was just that the goalposts had dramatically shifted, and it was about setting new goals and working towards those. And my ultimate goal was to live an independent life and just get back to uni and be able to live with my friends and not have to depend on family or a carer. So it really wasn't something in my sight until I was in hydrotherapy, and it was just being in the water made me so happy. And my parents said that, I needed to be able to make that time each day to do something that made me happy. That was what was going to get me through the accident. And it's really a recipe for just getting through life. To be honest, you've got to be able to make that time to do something for yourself. I'm a better person when I train in the morning. I'm a much better person to deal with. I'm much more productive. I'm happier. And that started right then in hospital with going to hydrotherapy. And it just built. And I was swimming because I loved it. I joined a club in Melbourne Vic Centre, 5 months after my accident. And I was just swimming because I was curious to what my body could do. I had this new body. I had to learn how to tumble turn and dive again with just the one leg. And it was curiosity and love for being in the water that saw me make my first nationals and swim a time that did land me on the swim team. And I was like, holy shit, how I suddenly achieved a goal, and I hadn't even set it as a goal, but that turned out to be what I needed to do. So it was coming home from that first World Championships where I felt like I'd fallen short of my potential, and I was completely revved up to go for Rio. I'd seen the Aussies on the top of that podium, and I thought, I want to get there. I want to be on that podium. I want my team standing and cheering for me. I want to be doing that for them. And yeah, it was literally a year out from Rio that I really set my sights on that target.
Yeah, I can imagine that when you received your silver medal at the Rio Paralympics, it would have been incredible. And did it make all the physical and mental challenges of your recovery worth it?
I was quite sick by the time of my race. Looking back now, leading into Rio, I had my first endo flare, and I ended up with quite a bad cold. And that's something that happened a lot when I was a kid. I would get quite sick before a competition. So it was the first time I was really able to get the mental, physical balance right and push through it and get up and race. And when there was just so much relief in seeing the number 2 next to my name and seeing that hard work, not just from my accident, but that whole 12 years being a swimmer as a kid pay off. And when I was behind the podium and stood up to get my medal, I was crying because my parents and my brother were in the stand, and I had this horrible runny nose, and I was so worried that I was going to get this big snot bubble that all the photographers in front of us would capture, and that would be my Paralympic moment. So I had this real sense of independence stepping up there, because I thought I've really done this, but it was straight away flooded with that sense of family and community, which is, my family in the stands, but also being my family, being the Australian Paralympic team all there. And our female captain of the Paralympic team, Danny DeToro, she'd actually come out and she managed to see my medal ceremony, which was an incredibly special moment for me, because she's such a incredible leader and legend of the Paralympic sport. She's a wheelchair tennis player, and also now table tennis player. So she's been to about 6 games, and it was incredible to have that kind of history and legacy standing up there and in the stands. And I felt like I was adding to that story of the Paralympic movement. So it was incredibly amazing, and you just realize how many people it takes to get you there. And even though you're the only one in the water, you definitely need a village to be able to get you up behind those blocks.
That's so true, and that's such a beautiful story. So, Monique, you train with a fin that's shaped like a mermaid tail. It's quite an innovative technology that hasn't been used much before. Can you tell us a bit about it?
So when I was in hospital, I had a visit from a man called Mike Rolls, who's a peer support leader in Limbs for Life in Australia. And he's a double below knee amputee. So he came to talk to me because he had a similar part of his journey where he had elected to go from a foot amputation to a below knee amputation. So it was incredibly valuable to be able to connect with someone who had been through something similar and get that advice. And Mum had told him before he came into my hospital room that I was a swimmer, because while I felt quite distant from that identity at the time, it was something that always piqued my interest in a conversation, or was still in the back of my head. So he was telling me that he had these prosthetic fins that he wore scuba diving. So similar to mine, except he doesn't have the glamorous scales that I've added in. So it's a technology that has been around. It's just not used necessarily for a training environment. So I was incredibly keen to get a flipper, because he said I could make it look like a mermaid. And something in me was just like, oh my God, I'm going to be able to be a mermaid. Amongst all this tragedy, I'm going to get out of here and be a mermaid. Maybe I will have to do something in swimming. And my first fin came from the prosthetics department at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, which they very kindly designed for me. And it's a very heavy flipper, and when it's in the water, because the structure of it kind of fills up with water. And as we would all know, if you've ever had a Band-Aid on or something in the water, nothing is waterproof. So eventually it does slip off my leg. So it's not the most ideal training aid in that sense, which is why I guess they're not used too much. But for me, the novelty of being able to feel like a mermaid, and it does engage a lot of my muscles on my right leg, which normally just float. I don't use my right leg much at all. And when I put that flipper on, it really engages up through the glutes and then through my core and my shoulders. So it's got a bit of a knock-on effect, and helps me work that little bit harder. So I enjoy putting the effort in for it. And I've just had a second one made with a really giant sort of scuba fin on it. So it feels a little bit lighter in the water, but it's incredibly fun for me, and I can keep up with my two-legged training partners now. So it's a little bit mix of a novelty, but also a training aid. And you got to find those ways to keep training interesting and keep it fun. So that's where that all started.
Yeah, I was looking through photos, and the scales look amazing. I saw you bejeweled one for an AFL game. You had Geelong bejeweled down your another prosthetic limb. I thought that was pretty cool. You were in the music video for Amy Shepherd's song "Kiss My Fat Ass." I watched it. I loved it. Everyone looked so free and so happy to be there. Just dancing around in their undies with other women, which was what the video was. I'm wondering, how long did it take for you to accept the new body you were in so much to, go into this video and just look like you were having the best time?
I credit the video very much to Amy. She was able to make such a positive and inclusive environment for that video. But I was eating myself before that. I think, again, swimming really helped me accept my body over the course of the accident, being stuck in hospital. And I had the amputation on one leg. I had a knee reconstruction on the other. So I wasn't able to do much moving around. And I did gain quite a bit of weight. And being able to get back into the water helped me just get fitter and healthier. So I wasn't, for one of the first times in my life, I wasn't fixated on getting down to a certain size. It was just about feeling more comfortable in my body. And obviously, if you have a lot of extra weight, the pressure going through your prosthetic can get quite painful and uncomfortable. A prosthetic leg, it's a very rigid structure. So if you put on too much weight, you're not going to fit into it. So it keeps you mobile. So when I was swimming, initially, I had my prosthetic leg made to look like a real leg. So they cover the prosthetic in foam and then put a pantyhose over the top. So it looks nothing like a real leg. But initially, I just wanted to get back to a normal life. And when I got back in the water and was training, I realized there was nothing normal about me, and that was a good thing. And when I'm in the water, I don't wear my prosthetic. And so it's not like I'm trying to hide anything from anybody. And I got more comfortable with the prosthetic that I have today, being just the socket and the metal pole. So I noticed as well, people wouldn't stare at me as much when I just had the prosthetic with the pole. I told the prosthetist to wait and not put the foam cover on, and I left it for a few weeks. And I think when I had the foam cover on, I had to wear this big knee sleeve, and it just didn't look right. So it didn't look like a prosthetic leg, but it also didn't look normal. So people tended to stare more to try to figure out what was going on. And when I just wore the prosthetic leg, people would see what it was and then look away very quickly because they were scared that I'd caught them. But I just sort of felt a bit more comfortable, and it felt a bit more sporty as well to have the sort of raw looking prosthetic. And probably a year after Rio, I came across a girl in America who was using chalk pens and blackboard paint on her prosthetic. So she was painting her socket with blackboard paint and then colouring it in with chalk pens. And I'd never been able to decide on a colour or a design for my prosthetic. So I love the idea that you could potentially change it every day. So I asked her if I could steal her incredible idea, and I've been doing that for the past few years. So whenever I go to an event or, have something I want to write on my leg, I can jazz it up for the day. I can leave little messages on there saying, if you're reading this, I have caught you staring at my leg, and I think it's time you came over and talked to me rather than stare. So I have a bit of fun with it, but it just made me really learn to embrace my body and embrace the difference. So I figured I'm never going to look like the women that you see on the front of those magazine covers, and that's a good thing. And I think that's what Amy Shepherd is really working towards with her Kiss My Fat Ass movement, is that no one actually looks like the women on those magazine covers, because there's so much photoshopping going on, or the life that you're living when you're so focused on looking a certain way can be quite restrictive. So it's all about enjoying how you feel and loving the body you're in, rather than focusing on how that looks. So she was getting her hair done up here in Brisbane, and saw me and my friend Ellie Cole, who's also one of the leaders on the Australian swim team, saw us walking because we were actually on a swim camp. And she sent her friend out to chase us down and ask us if we'd want to be in her music video. So unfortunately, Ellie lives in Sydney, so she wasn't able to participate. But I heard the opportunity of being in a music video, and I thought, this is something I'll regret if I don't do it. And when she told us that she wanted to, have this amazing group of women dancing in their underwear, I thought, oh, I can't do that. And it was actually less than a month after I'd had my first laparoscopy and been diagnosed with endometriosis. So I had 4 incisions healing around my stomach, and I definitely hadn't been able to do a sit-up. So I was thinking, I'm not in shape. But I thought that they're obviously at the point where they're chasing people down on the streets, so they clearly need someone in there. And I also realized that when I was in hospital, seeing people in the media or active on social media showing off their ability was something that really helped me be hopeful for what my ability was going to be. And I thought, I need to step up and be what I used so much and what I relied on. So, if you want to see change and you want to see more people with a disability represented, if you're given that opportunity, you've got to be able to walk the walk and step up and take it. So as scared as I was, I rocked up and got my bra and knickers and danced around for the day. And it was such a amazing day, and we created something so incredible. And then it wasn't until a few months later we all went, oh God, this is about to go out internationally. Like what we did is actually everyone's going to be able to see it. So I think it came out incredibly well, and meeting those women, there was such a diverse range of women. We had transgender, we had Indigenous women, women of colour. It was an incredible effort from Amy to put that together. And yeah, it's definitely been something that I look back now and I'm so glad I did it, because I would have absolutely regretted it if I'd seen the final product and hadn't been in there.
Yeah, well, that's right. I suppose it's just a little bit of discomfort at the time, and then the final product was so beautiful. And I'm sure there's so many girls watching that who, you know, would feel really warm watching that. Let's talk about endo. So last year you were diagnosed with endometriosis and adenomyosis, which you're probably going to pronounce better than me in the next few minutes. These conditions often take years to diagnose, despite affecting so many women. And you spent 5 years swimming at the elite level while managing these, you know, debilitating symptoms before you were diagnosed. Can you tell us a bit about this experience?
Yeah, so endometriosis affects 1 in 9 women in Australia. However, on the 2019 para team that we took to the World Championships, there are 4 of us who are diagnosed with either endometriosis or adenomyosis. So there was probably only about 15 girls on the team. So we're starting to see a lot more athletes getting their diagnosis with it. So it's very interesting to see that change in statistics, because we really need to be doing more work to see why as athletes we seem to be more affected, because you're absolutely right with the word debilitating. The symptoms can be quite minute, or they can be incredibly severe. And I think as an athlete, you just add this extra level of uncertainty, because some symptoms, you've got irregular periods or period pain. And when we say period pain, it's a pain that causes you to have to change your plans. So if you can't take a Panadol or a Nurofen, and the pain exceeds that, that's a pain that is not normal, and you should be seeing your doctor in relation to that. But also back pain, fatigue, pain sensitivity. I would find that I'd be going to the physio and my body would be in the same condition it was the week before, but I was suddenly crying getting the treatment because my pain sensitivity would just skyrocket. I had this horrible back pain that manifested as nerve pain from my left hip all the way down to my toes. I had a lot of trouble sleeping for a long time. So you've got fatigue and insomnia in there as well. The bloating, the cramps, the discomfort. It's just so intense, and you almost don't know which symptom belongs to what aspect of your life. And I ended up spending a lot of the time being like, well, I'm an athlete. I'm meant to be tired. I'm meant to be fatigued. And it was only when I would be getting ready to race and we have a taper and we rest up that I wasn't feeling any better. And I just couldn't seem to put that race together. I would feel like I was racing with a 10-kilo vest on because my body just could not summon the power to feel fresh and sparky on race day. I was also getting terrible irritable bowel syndrome, and I kept thinking I was coming down with bouts of gastro, but then the next day my period would kick in. And I saw over the 5 years 14 doctors, a number of which were team doctors, in direct relation to my period, and none of them had any idea or offered any sound advice. At points I'd been laughed at. I'd been told that my symptoms weren't related to my period. I was often questioned, like, am I really in pain or am I just sore today? And you just start to think, well, maybe this is what it takes to be an athlete and maybe I just can't do it. And I for those years, seem to forget the fact that I'd lost a leg a few years ago. So I probably have a pretty good idea of what pain is and should probably trust myself a little bit more. And it wasn't until I had a terrible racing experience at the 2018 Pan Pacs. I had my period for about 2 weeks before the race, which was incredibly uncharacteristic for me. and it was just in so much pain. And I went about 9 seconds over my time in that race. I had pins and needles in my arms within the first 50 meters of a 400. And I just had no idea why my body was suddenly crapping out on me. And I'd be able to put good training together for, a few weeks. And my period was incredibly irregular. So I could have even up to 2-3 months without one. And then suddenly when it counted, which also happened to be when I was under pressure and getting stressed, I would have this massive period pain, couldn't keep anything in my stomach when it came to eating. I'd often end up with a bad cold or quite sick. And when I qualified for the 2019 Worlds, which I qualified with a top time, I still hadn't improved since Rio, and I knew that I was capable of more. And I went to my doctor and I said, I want to see an endometriosis specialist, having very little idea of what endo was and really not thinking it was going to make a difference. I felt like I had to do something. And that's when I met Graham Tronk, who's my gynecologist. And within the first few minutes, he looked at me and he said, I can tell you, you've got endo. And unfortunately, it's a condition that has to be definitively diagnosed through a laparoscopy. So that is surgery. So I took a leap of faith and trusted him and had the surgery 3 months out from the World Championships. And it was after the surgery, the anesthesiologist came over to me. And I'd previously told my mum that if they didn't find anything, I was going to have to tell my coach that they did, because I was just so lost on what to do. And I didn't think I could face my coach without an answer. And the anesthesiologist came over and he's like, Mon, you're all good. You're fine. We found the endo. And I just burst into tears. And the first thing I said to my mum when I saw her was, it wasn't in my head. It was something real. What it is, it's the endometrial lining that grows in your uterus and is ultimately what your period is. Its lining similar to that starts growing outside the uterus. And it's common that grows in and around the pelvis, but it can honestly end up anywhere. So that lining will also bleed. So that's why it tends to have some correlation with your cycle. But that lining growing out of your uterus will keep building up, and it will also bleed. So it's incredibly painful, and it has to be removed. I was told by a few doctors that if I did have it, I could just get a Mirena and that would be, and sort of stop having my period, and that would be enough. But that growth is sitting there and it needs to be taken out. So I had a very extensive removal of endometriosis in 2019. And due to jumping back in the water with all guns blazing, trying to get back to that World Championships, I needed another surgery this year. So the day that the Paralympics and Olympics were announced as postponed, myself and one of my close friends, Madeline Groves, who's also an Olympic swimmer with endo and adno, we went in for some more work because we knew that this time we could actually recover from our surgery. We turned the lockdown into an opportunity. And I had a lot of adhesions where my ovary had actually adhered to my pelvic wall from the last surgery. So because so much tissue was taken out, things had sort of grown back and sort of stuck in the wrong place. So I was also diagnosed with adenomyosis, which is where the lining of the uterus grows into the uterus and then bleeds in there, which is as painful as it sounds. So my current treatment is I have a Mirena, and I'm also in a medically induced state of menopause. So I'm having a lot of hot flushes and stiff joints, and my brain can get a little bit foggy at times. But the idea is that we're currently sort of paused all the reproductive function of my body so it can really heal, and my immune system can actually kick into gear and start to heal and attack that endo and adno. So I'm happy to say I'm feeling probably the best I have in a few years. But it took five years to get a diagnosis, and the average is 7 to 10 for most women. And the fact that I saw 14 doctors, and a lot of which were on teams. So they're doctors that were there. They weren't me specifically seeking out a GP and going down to the doctor's office. So many women go through so many symptoms, and the way we experience those symptoms are really unique to everybody. And if there's anyone out there who's listening and thinks that these might be ticking any boxes, I encourage you to check out the Qendo website. It's Qendo. And to sort of have a look through some of their information about the two conditions, because we've been brought up to believe that there's a certain amount of pain that a woman just has to push through. And then as an athlete, even more so. There's, at the moment, there are no female coaches on the Australian swim team, both Olympic and Paralympic. And it just means that we really need to kick up the education for our coaches. The amount of times I've gone to my coach, and I've had several different coaches over the years, and said to them, just tell me what to do. Like, I've got a runny nose. Do I push through today? Do I not? How do we change things? And I just give them so much power over my swimming, which I'm fine with because, they are the coach, but we really need to be educating them more, so that when a female athlete is continually turning up with period pain to training, the coach can say, you need to go see a doctor. Because if I were to turn up to training with a cold, I would be sent to a doctor or told to stay home so I don't get the rest of the team sick. And period pain and female health needs to be considered in the same way, because we are putting up with so much. And I've seen so many friends have to get this surgery so close to a championships, and it really just dictates, changes the results. I fell off the podium for the first time last year, and I was prepared for something like that to happen. I'm proud that I just got to the championships, but I think that, that 5 years of symptoms, if anything had come to light earlier, things could have changed. And even my experience, I would have loved to have felt more support and understanding from my coach. So I'm working with Madeline Groves to put together some training for both athletes and coaches so that we can really change the way that we look at women's health, and hopefully change a lot of female athletes' experience through sport, so it can be a much more positive and supported one.
You're an ambassador for Qendo. What does that involve, and how important is their work to you?
Qendo is incredibly important to me. So it is a national charity, and they even have a women's helpline that you can call, which is just absolutely incredible. They offer such a range of resources, and my role is really, just to promote their work, be involved with any sort of, educational material that I can be. Maddie as well is also an ambassador. So like I said, we're working to get together some training for coaches in particular, and just raise that awareness of sort of what we've been through, to see if there's any other women who are in the same boat. And there's 2 women on the team who, because I'd been through my laparoscopy, I then noticed how much pain they were in, have sent them to my doctor, and they've also been positively diagnosed. So it's a little bit ridiculous to me that there can be an athlete doubled over in pain and their coach isn't taking notice of it, but another teammate is, and they're ending up with these diagnoses. So we really need to change that culture. And that's what Qendo really, really works towards. So it's a great charity, and it's just that environment where you feel supported. And when I first came across them before I had my diagnosis, and I was reading through some information and some testimonials, and I was like, oh my gosh, there are other people out there who have had something similar to me. Because we trust doctors so completely. And I said I've been to 14 of them who had just told me so confidently that my symptoms weren't related, or it was just stress, or it was something that would pass. And then finally I was seeing that, well, maybe they were wrong. And it's so difficult to trust yourself and to go have a surgery, because, it's time out of training, or it's time out of work. There's also a big financial cost to it as well. So it's not an easy decision, but I definitely felt so so brave stepping up and doing that, and getting that diagnosis. I just felt so relieved, and it all made sense. And it sort of was that second acceptance of my body and feeling proud of really how much my body was putting up with. And we do, the way endo starts, it's not there's not like a definitive theory as to how it comes about or starts forming, but it is thought that trauma can play a role in some cases. So it's pretty likely that my accident is what set off my endometriosis. So that was a whole nother mental challenge, in the sense that I do feel like I've quite recovered from my accident, and I felt like I'd put that trauma to bed a long time ago. So to get the diagnosis really was a bit of a reminder that I will always be, working with this new body to continue that recovery. It's not something that you can ever really completely close the door on. So yeah, having that group of women there is amazing.
Yeah, and it sounds like the work they're doing is so important, because it's an issue that's as common as asthma. So I think it's really amazing that they're doing this. Monique, I'm really interested in your relationship with anger. When I was researching you and through this discussion, I just imagine that you would have felt would have the right to feel so much resentment, following your fall. And then as you go through your Paralympic journey, just being told by so many people that what you're feeling is incorrect, that you should be expected to feel this way, and your pain is an overreaction. And yet when you talk about everything in this discussion, you do it with such, openness and humor. You're telling funny stories, you're cracking a joke. I'm really interested, how do you deal with the fact that do you have much anger, and how are you dealing with it?
That's a really, really interesting question. I haven't actually been asked something like that before. When I was in hospital, because I was faced with the decision to whether or not to amputate further up my leg, I had to see a psychologist every week. And she was fantastic, because I remember saying to her, I don't feel angry towards any friends, or I had no idea what had happened that night. And people were trying to come to me with information, and I was like, I don't really think it's going to do anything to learn more about it. And she talked to me about anger, and was like, it's one of those emotions that can really just consume everything, but it's not a very productive emotion. It's not something where you then feel motivated to go and do something necessarily, and it can kind of just consume you, and it can really hinder your ability to move forward. So I'm a big believer in, when you do feel an emotion, you have to feel it, and that it's not ideal to just push it down. So I think knowing that anger, not much will come of it, is something that I definitely have always remembered. And I think, again, swimming is something that really helps me get through all my emotions. I know in high school, I never got involved in the girl drama, and I went to an all-girls high school because I was so tired from training. I just could not be bothered to listen to my friends bitch about each other. And it's sort of the same when I'm training. It's just a way to let everything out. And it's sort of like a moving meditation in a way. So when I'm not training, I do notice my my emotions tend to run a bit higher, which is why I always try to keep some level of activity, whether I'm training or on holiday. But I think as well, with that, nothing's going to change. When I was in hospital, we as a family and individually made the decision not to investigate into what had happened the night of my accident, because investigating or going through the court system, it wasn't going to give me my leg back. And no amount of money is going to change the fact that I'm an amputee. And so it just didn't seem worth it. It seemed that putting my effort into something that could be changed, being the recovery process or where I wanted to go from that hospital room, would be a better thing to do. So I can look back over the last 5 years, and a little bit more reassuring to be able to see where I've had big endo flares and be like, okay, that's why 1 week I was able to do these incredible times in training, and then a few weeks later I wasn't able to race. And there's sort of that comfort in knowing that there was something else going on. But again, if I were to be angry and assign blame, and there is a bit of frustration that doctors weren't able to pick up things quicker, and that, like, I definitely feel those. But at the end of the day, a doctor can't diagnose something that they haven't been taught or something that they're not aware of. So rather than buckling down and being angry about it, which again won't change any results from the last few years, I think it's more important to turn around and try to educate and make the experience of the next person a better one. And by doing that, that's what's had me become such close friends with Maddie and the women at Qendo. So when you make those decisions to sort of go beyond your own experience, you can meet some incredible people, and you also then just make the next phase of what you're going into a more positive one as well. So I think if I do get angry or anything, it is important to let that out. It's usually a good training session or a spin class, or sometimes you just got to put on some loud music and maybe just have a quick scream or something like that. It's important to let that, it's all energy in your body, really. And it's important to let that out, because I know that if you don't, something will happen that will just tip you over, and you'll end up getting angry at someone who doesn't deserve it. I know I'm in a long distance relationship with my partner, and with a lot of the endo treatments, hormones can go up and down, and my emotional roller coaster has been very high. And sometimes I just have to say to him, just let me have an hour to myself and I'll just process this, because I don't want to say something to you I'm going to regret in the heat of the moment. Like, I'm just annoyed at this, and it's not actually you, it's something else. Let me go do my training session and I'll come back in a better frame of mind. So it's important to acknowledge the emotions, but also acknowledge what they're doing. If they're not helping the situation, then you've got to find a way to work through them. And I should also say, I do see my sports psychologist probably once or twice a month. So that support is also incredibly helpful.
Yeah, so Monique, looking forward to Tokyo 2021, obviously your training would have changed a bit during because of coronavirus. What does your training plan look like for the next 12 months?
So I'm currently training with Yeronga Park under coach Rob van der Zandt. And he's an Olympic swimmer from Sydney 2000. So it's great having a coach who's, really been through what we are going through. There's a really good understanding and very open communication. When I moved to Yeronga just at the end of COVID, he sat down with me and listened to me talk all about how my endo and adno can affect my training and what I need from him as a coach, which is exactly what we need to be doing. But at the moment, it's all about remembering why we started. And, there's still a lot of uncertainty about things moving forward. So I've reset my goals to a certain time that I want to achieve. I currently, my PBs are 4 minutes, 33 seconds, and I'd love to get under that 4 minute 30 mark. And I do believe I'm quite capable of that. So my goal and focus is to achieve that time rather than a place on the podium. So I've got a goal that will sort of be able to transcend any events that happen over the next 12 months. So whether it ends up just being standing up at training and doing a time trial on my own, I want to be able to get up and do that time. So it's about enjoying what I'm doing. It's an incredible community at Yeronga, train incredibly hard, but they've also have a lot of fun while doing it. So it's remembering that community, the fun, the enjoyment that comes with swimming, and then also that curiosity of, how far can we push ourselves and just what are we really, really capable of. So taking it each day as we can, each opportunity to get in the water is one for improvement, and it's one that we didn't have a few months ago. So we take the opportunities we get, make the most of them, and we'll be prepared for whatever comes our way over the next 12 months. But fingers crossed, we'll be able to come together next year. And I think the saddest thing about the Paralympics not going forward this year is it's this incredible movement and really unique environment. And I realized how much I just wanted to get back to that and sort of have that reminder of just how incredible it is to be a para athlete. You see all these people with this incredible range of ability doing the most amazing things, just even from arm amputees using their feet to eat their food, using their knife and fork. It's amazing how people have adapted, and it fills you with this sense of pride and like hope as well that gets you through that next 4 years. So it'll be sad not to come together as a Paralympic movement, but we're definitely looking towards the day that we can.
Yeah, I think it's pretty wise just training for any event, because you don't know what's going to happen next year. I guess none of us do. Monique, thank you so much for talking to us today. I can say that has been one of my favourite chats on this podcast. You have been so open and so honest, and learning your story was just absolutely fascinating, and the way that you handle yourself as well is really inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was an interesting conversation. Head over to wissports.com to find the show notes. Follow Monique on Twitter at monmurphy287 and at mon.murphy on Instagram. Find Wis Sports at Wis Sports on all socials, and you can find Women's Sport Australia at Oz Women's Sports on all socials. Or if you prefer to email over social media, the email is info@wissports.com. Thanks for listening. We'll have more amazing sportswomen lined up to come onto the show, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another fantastic guest.